The morning sun cast long shadows across Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. Sarah Mitchell stood at the wrought iron gate, her press credentials hanging around her neck, swaying gently in the June breeze. 20 years had passed since the world lost Michael Jackson, and she was here to cover the anniversary memorial service. As a music journalist who had grown up dancing to Thriller in her childhood bedroom, this assignment felt deeply personal. The cemetery grounds were immaculate as always, with manicured lawns stretching toward the horizon and ancient oak trees providing shade for the departed. Security personnel in dark suits were everywhere, checking credentials with military precision. The Jackson family had kept Michael's exact burial location private for 2 decades, allowing him the peace in death that had eluded him in life. Only family members and a select few knew the precise spot where the king of pop rested. Sarah joined the growing crowd of journalists, fans, and invited guests near the great mausoleum. Fans had traveled from every corner of the globe, wearing sequin gloves and fedoras, carrying flowers and handwritten letters. Some wept openly. Others sang his songs softly, their voices creating an impromptu harmony that floated through the air like a prayer. She recognized faces from previous anniversaries, the same devoted followers who made this pilgrimage every year, their grief still fresh despite the passage of time. The official ceremony began at 10 o'clock. Janet Jackson approached the podium, her composure remarkable despite the visible pain in her eyes. She spoke of her brother's genius, his kindness, and the hole his absence had left in their family. Her voice cracked only once, when she mentioned how Michael would have loved to see his children grown into the remarkable adults they had become. Prince, Paris, and Blanket, now known as Bye Guy, stood together, united in their private grief, declining to speak publicly but their presence speaking volumes. As the ceremony continued, Sarah noticed something unusual. Maintenance workers were gathered near the eastern wing of the mausoleum, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Their body language suggested distress. One worker kept gesturing emphatically while another spoke rapidly into a radio. Security personnel began moving toward them with purpose. Sarah's journalistic instincts kicked into high gear. Something was wrong. She began edging closer, using the crowd as cover. A memorial speech provided perfect audio camouflage as she maneuvered through the assembled mourners. She caught fragments of conversation from the workers. Words like structural damage and water intrusion, and immediate assessment drifted toward her. Her heart began racing. Was there a problem with the mausoleum itself? Then she heard something that made her blood run cold. One security guard, speaking into his radio with barely contained alarm, said 4 words that would change everything. "We found something inside." The ceremony continued, oblivious to the growing commotion. Sarah watched as more security personnel arrived, along with individuals in suits who were clearly cemetery management. They formed a tight circle, blocking any view of whatever had been discovered. The maintenance workers who had made the initial finding were being questioned intensely. One of them looked pale, shaken, as if he had seen something that contradicted everything he believed about reality. Sarah knew she needed to get closer, but the security cordon was tightening by the minute. She noticed a young cemetery employee, probably an interne, standing apart from the main group, nervously checking his phone. She approached him casually, as if lost. He was maybe 22, with kind eyes and an employee badge that read Daniel. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I'm trying to find the restroom. Can you point me in the right direction?" Daniel looked relieved to have a normal interaction amidst the chaos. "Sure, there's one just past the main office building, to your left." He pointed, then glanced back at the security gathering nervously. Sarah took a calculated risk. "What's going on over there? I'm a journalist, but I'm not looking to cause problems. I just want to understand." She kept her voice gentle, non-threatening. Daniel hesitated, then whispered, "There was routine maintenance scheduled for today, just basic inspection work. But when they accessed Michael Jackson's crypt, they found something that shouldn't be there. I don't know the details, but I heard one of the senior workers say the seal had been broken from the inside. That's impossible, right? I mean, that's completely impossible." Sarah's mind reeled. Broken from the inside? The implications were staggering and absurd in equal measure. Before she could ask more questions, a senior security officer called Daniel away sharply. The young man hurried off, leaving Sarah with more questions than answers. She returned to the press area, her mind racing through possibilities. A broken seal could mean many things: vandalism, structural failure, or something else entirely. But from the inside, that suggested something had pushed outward, which made no logical sense. Unless someone had been sealed inside by accident, which seemed unlikely given the scrutiny surrounding such a high-profile burial. Or unless the crypt had been accessed secretly and resealed improperly. The ceremony concluded with a final musical tribute, fans singing "Man in the Mirror" in unison, their voices rising toward the California sky. But Sarah barely heard it. She watched the security team begin erecting temporary barriers around the eastern wing of the mausoleum, blocking it from view. Whatever they had found, they were taking no chances with public exposure. As the crowd began to disperse, Sarah made a decision. She would not leave this cemetery until she knew the truth. 20 years of carefully maintained peace and privacy around Michael Jackson's final resting place had just been shattered. And somehow, she was going to discover why. As evening approached and the memorial crowds thinned, Sarah remained in the cemetery, having convinced a sympathetic security guard that she needed to finish photographing the floral tributes for her article. She positioned herself near the great mausoleum, close enough to observe but far enough to avoid suspicion. The temporary barriers now completely surrounded the eastern wing, and portable lighting had been brought in as the sun began its descent. Around 6 o'clock, 3 vehicles arrived: a white van with forensic examination services printed discreetly on the side, a black SUV carrying what appeared to be Jackson family representatives, and a sedan that delivered 2 men in expensive suits who had "lawyer" written all over them. Sarah's pulse quickened. This was far more serious than routine maintenance issues. She watched as the group entered the cordoned area, their faces grave. Through a gap in the barriers, she glimpsed the entrance to the crypt itself, now surrounded by equipment cases and portable examination lights. The forensic team worked with methodical precision, photographing everything before touching anything. This was being treated as a potential crime scene. Sarah's phone buzzed. It was Marcus, her editor, texting for an update. She had mentioned the disturbance earlier, but now she had to decide how much to reveal. If this story broke prematurely, she would lose exclusive access to whatever was unfolding. She texted back something vague about memorial coverage and put her phone away. As darkness fell completely, the cemetery officially closed to the public, but the work of the mausoleum continued under bright portable lights that cast eerie shadows across the marble walls. Sarah had relocated to a position behind a large family monument about 50 yards away, concealed but with a clear line of sight. She knew she was potentially trespassing now, but the journalist in her could not walk away from this story. Around 9 o'clock, the group emerged from the crypt entrance. Even from a distance, Sarah could see the shock on their faces. One of the Jackson family representatives, a middle-aged woman she recognized as a cousin, was being supported by another person, as if her legs had given out. The lawyers were in intense discussion, gesturing emphatically. The forensic team leader, a gray-haired woman with decades of experience etched into her features, stood apart from the group, speaking urgently into her phone. Sarah desperately wished she could hear what they were saying, but she did not dare get closer. Instead, she focused on reading their body language, a skill she had developed over years of investigative journalism. Whatever they had found inside that crypt had fundamentally disturbed everyone present. This was not simple vandalism or structural damage. This was something unprecedented. At 10:30, another vehicle arrived, this one unmarked but clearly official. 2 detectives emerged, their badges visible even from Sarah's distant vantage point. The situation had escalated to law enforcement involvement. Sarah's mind raced through scenarios. Had someone stolen something from the crypt? Had there been body desecration? The thought made her ill, but she forced herself to consider all possibilities. The detectives spent nearly an hour inside the crypt area with the forensic team. When they emerged, one of them was carrying a sealed evidence bag containing something small. In the artificial light, Sarah could not make out what it was, but everyone gathered around to look at it with expressions that mixed confusion with disbelief. The lead detective shook his head repeatedly, as if rejecting what his eyes were showing him. Around midnight, the group began to disperse. Sarah heard fragments of conversation as people walked toward their vehicles. "Need to verify everything twice," one detective said. "Chain of custody is crucial," a lawyer insisted. "The family needs answers before this goes public," the Jackson representative stated firmly. Then she heard something that made her hold her breath. DNA analysis will take at least 48 hours, but the preliminary findings are impossible to explain. DNA analysis? Sarah's mind exploded with questions. Why would they need DNA testing in relation to a crypt that had been sealed for 20 years? Was there a question about the identity of the remains? Had someone planted biological evidence? Or was something far stranger occurring? As the last vehicle departed around 1 a.m, Sarah remained hidden, waiting for the security patrol to pass. She knew she should leave, write up what she had observed, and wait for official statements. But her instincts told her this story was far bigger than anyone yet realized. The reaction of everyone involved suggested something that defied rational explanation. She waited until 2:30, when the security patrol's rounds had become predictable. Then, heart pounding, she moved closer to the barriers. She did not intend to breach them, just to look for any detail that might provide insight. As she approached, she noticed something the crew had left behind in their hurried departure, a clipboard with paperwork partially visible through the transparent plastic cover. Glancing around nervously, Sarah used her phone to photograph the visible portion. The image was dark and partially obscured, but she could make out certain words on what appeared to be a forensic inventory form. Her hand shook as she zoomed in on the photo. The words she could read made no sense. Biological material, fresh and temporal impossibility, and secondary occupant evidence. Secondary occupant? Her breath caught. Was there a second body in Michael Jackson's crypt? Had someone been buried there secretly, perhaps a victim of foul play? But that did not explain the word fresh in relation to biological material. Nothing should be fresh after 20 years. Sarah's phone battery was dying, but she took several more photos of the area, capturing the disturbed earth near the crypt entrance, the forensic equipment cases, and the evidence markers that had been placed at various points. Then she heard voices, security making an unscheduled round. She retreated quickly, her heart hammering, making her way toward the exit she had scouted earlier. As she climbed carefully over the decorative fence of the cemetery's eastern boundary, she heard her phone buzz one final time before the battery died. A text from an unknown number. Stop digging. You don't understand what you're getting into. This is bigger than you can imagine. Sarah dropped to the ground on the other side of the fence, breathing hard. Someone knew she was here. Someone was watching. And whatever secret lay in Michael Jackson's tomb, after 20 years, powerful forces wanted it to remain hidden. But she was already too deep into the story to turn back now. Tomorrow, she would begin finding answers, starting with a forensic team leader whose face had shown such profound shock. Because something impossible had been discovered in that crypt, and Sarah Mitchell was going to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Sarah spent the remainder of the night in her cramped Los Angeles apartment, poring over the photos she had taken, trying to extract every possible detail. She connected her dying phone to her laptop and transferred the images, then enhanced them using professional software. The words on the forensic inventory form became clearer, though still partially obscured. She could now make out additional phrases, chronodisplacement indicators, and living tissue samples, and most disturbingly, subject appears to have exited containment. Exited containment? She read the phrase 5 times, certain she was misunderstanding. But there it was, in the clinical language of forensic documentation. Someone or something had apparently left the crypt. The logical explanation would be grave robbery, that someone had broken in and removed the remains. But that did not align with what Daniel had told her about the seal being broken from the inside, nor did it explain the need for DNA analysis or the references to fresh biological material. At 6 a.m, exhausted but unable to sleep, Sarah began making calls. Her first was to Dr. Raymond Chen, a forensic pathologist she had worked with on previous investigative pieces. He was trustworthy and had no connection to the Jackson family or Forest Lawn. She needed an expert opinion untainted by whatever pressure was being applied to the official investigators. "Sarah, do you know what time it is?" Raymond answered groggily. "I need your help with something that makes no sense," she said, dispensing with pleasantries. "Hypothetically, if a body had been entombed for 20 years in a sealed crypt, what would cause fresh biological material to be present?" Raymond was quiet for a moment, his scientific mind engaging. "Fresh? Define fresh. Are we talking decomposition gases, which can remain active for extended periods, or actual living tissue?" The paperwork said living tissue samples. That's impossible. After 20 years, assuming standard embalming and entombment, you're looking at advanced decomposition or mummification depending on conditions. There would be no living tissue. Are you certain about what you read? Sarah sent him the enhanced photos. She heard him open his laptop, the click of keys, then a sharp intake of breath. Where did you get this? His voice had changed, becoming tense. This is from the Jackson Crypt investigation, isn't it? Sarah, this is way beyond my clearance or expertise. These terms, chronodisplacement, temporal impossibility, these aren't standard forensic terminology. This reads like something from a theoretical physics paper, not a death investigation. What could cause these findings? Sarah pressed. Give me theories, no matter how outlandish. Raymond hesitated. The only scenario where you would find living biological material associated with remains at old would be if there was contamination from another source. Maybe an animal got into the crypt somehow, or there was mold growth that was being analyzed. But this language about secondary occupant and exit from containment? Sarah, this sounds like they found evidence that someone living was inside that crypt recently, which is impossible unless the seal was compromised. And even then, why would someone climb into a 20-year-old tomb? Unless they climbed out of it, Sarah thought, but did not say aloud. The idea was absurd, the stuff of horror movies, not reality. Yet everything she had witnessed pointed towards something that defied conventional explanation. After ending the call with Raymond, Sarah contacted a forensic examination company whose van she had seen. She posed as a Jackson family representative, using information she had gathered over years of covering the family, and asked to speak with the lead investigator about the preliminary findings. She was transferred twice before reaching someone in authority. "This is Dr. Elizabeth Morrison," a woman answered, her voice carrying the weight of exhaustion. "How can I help you?" Sarah recognized a voice from the cemetery, the same woman who had stood apart making urgent phone calls. She took a breath and gambled. "Dr. Morrison, this is Sarah Mitchell from the Los Angeles Tribune. Before you hang up, I know what you found at Forest Lawn yesterday, and I'm going to run this story with or without your input. I'm offering you the chance to provide context before speculation runs wild." There was a long silence. Then, surprisingly, Dr. Morrison laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "You have no idea what you're stepping into, Ms. Mitchell. None whatsoever." "Then help me understand. What did you find in that crypt?" Another pause, longer this time. When Dr. Morrison spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I've been doing this work for 32 years. I've examined everything from ancient Egyptian mummies to modern murder victims. I thought I had seen every possible scenario. But what we found yesterday has no precedent in medical science, forensic history, or rational explanation." "Tell me," Sarah urged gently. "I can't. Not officially. There are legal restrictions, family privacy concerns, and frankly, implications that go far beyond my expertise. But I will tell you this. The DNA evidence we collected is being analyzed by 3 independent laboratories because the first results were so extraordinary that we assumed equipment malfunction. We're comparing it against multiple samples from the Jackson family, from Michael's children, and from archived samples taken during his life." "What are you comparing it to?" Sarah asked, though she thought she knew the answer. "To the biological material we found. Material that, according to every test we've run, is less than 72 hours old." Dr. Morrison's voice cracked slightly. "Fresh skin cells, Ms. Mitchell. Hair follicles with intact roots. Fibers that match clothing that was not part of the original burial garments. And fingerprints on the interior of the crypt seal that match." She stopped abruptly. "Match Michael Jackson's prints." Sarah completed the sentence. "I've said too much already. They'll revoke my license if this conversation becomes public. But you need to understand something. There are only 2 possibilities here, and both of them are impossible. Either someone with access to Michael Jackson's biological material staged an elaborate hoax inside that crypt, or something occurred that violates every principle of biology, physics, and death itself. Neither explanation is acceptable." Before Sarah could respond, Dr. Morrison continued, her voice now urgent. "Whatever you write, be careful. There are people involved in this investigation who are very concerned about what these findings mean, not just for the Jackson family's privacy, but for much larger questions. Questions about what we think we know about mortality, about consciousness, about the boundaries between life and death. And there are others who want this buried, literally and figuratively, because those questions are too dangerous to ask publicly. The line went dead. Sarah sat staring at her phone, her mind reeling. Fresh biological material. Fingerprints from inside the crypt. DNA that apparently matched Michael Jackson himself 20 years after his death. It was impossible, yet multiple scientists were documenting it as fact. She spent the rest of the day tracking down other sources. She called contact at Forest Lawn, in the Jackson family's legal team, and among memorial service attendees. Most refused to speak. Those who did speak provided only cryptic warnings. "Let this go," one said. "Some mysteries are better left unsolved," warned another. A third contact, a cemetery employee she had known for years, told her flatly, whatever they found is being contained, not just the physical evidence, but the information itself. People with serious resources are making sure this doesn't become public knowledge. By evening, Sarah had assembled a disturbing picture. Something had happened inside Michael Jackson's crypt that challenged fundamental assumptions about death. The evidence suggested biological activity where none should exist. The investigators were treating it not as a crime scene in the traditional sense, but as an anomaly that required explanation from multiple scientific disciplines. And powerful interests were working hard to keep the findings secret. As darkness fell over Los Angeles, Sarah made a decision. She would pursue this story to its conclusion, regardless of the consequences. Because if even a fraction of what she was uncovering was true, the world deserved to know that something impossible had occurred at Forest Lawn Memorial Park. Something that suggested Michael Jackson's story did not end on June 25, 2009, but had somehow continued in ways that defied everything humanity understood about life, death, and what lay between. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Ms. Mitchell, we need to meet." The voice was male, cultured, with an accent she could not quite place. "You're investigating something that requires context you don't have. Come alone to Griffith Observatory at 10 tonight. We'll provide answers, but only if you agree to certain conditions." "Who is this?" Sarah demanded. "Someone who knows what happened 20 years ago and what's happening now. Someone who can help you understand why the impossible sometimes occurs. 10 o'clock, Ms. Mitchell. Don't be late." The line went dead, leaving Sarah alone with her questions, her evidence, and a meeting that would either provide answers or lead her into danger she could not yet imagine. Sarah arrived at Griffith Observatory 15 minutes early, parking her car in the nearly empty lot. The iconic building glowed against the night sky, its copper domes catching the city lights of Los Angeles spread below. At this hour, the observatory was closed to the public, but someone had clearly arranged access. The front doors were unlocked. She entered cautiously, her footsteps echoing through the darkened entrance hall. The planetarium's main chamber loomed ahead, its dome ceiling barely visible in the ambient light. Then she saw him, a tall man in his 60s, impeccably dressed, standing before the massive Foucault pendulum that swung endlessly, demonstrating Earth's rotation. He turned as she approached, his face weathered but distinguished, his eyes sharp with intelligence and something else, burden, perhaps, or sorrow. "Ms. Mitchell, thank you for coming. I'm Dr. Alexander Crane. I was Michael Jackson's physician during the final years of his life, though not the doctor who treated him the night he died. I've been waiting 20 years to tell this story to someone who might actually believe it." Sarah's guard went up immediately. "Why me? And why now?" Dr. Crane gestured toward the chairs positioned around the pendulum. "Because the truth can no longer be contained. What happened at Forest Lawn 2 days ago was inevitable. I tried to warn the family, but they thought they had more time. Please, sit. This will take some explanation." Sarah remained standing. "Start with what they found in the crypt." Dr. Crane smiled sadly. "Direct. I appreciate that. Very well. What they found was evidence that Michael Jackson's body was not in that crypt for the entire 20 years since his burial. In fact, based on the forensic analysis, his body disappeared from the crypt approximately 18 months ago and returned only days before the maintenance inspection. That's impossible, Sarah said flatly. The seal was intact. The external seal was intact, Dr. Crane corrected. But there's something about Michael's case that was never made public, something that a very small group of people knew about. Ms. Mitchell, what do you know about suspended animation research? The question came from nowhere. Sarah blinked. Suspended animation? Like cryogenics? Freezing bodies for future revival. Not freezing, but yes, the principle is similar. Now, what if I told you that in the final years of his life, Michael was not just a patient but participant in cutting-edge medical research? Research funded by some of the wealthiest individuals in the world. People desperate to find ways to extend human life or even temporarily suspend biological processes. Sarah felt her skepticism rising. You're saying Michael Jackson was involved in experimental life extension research? Not involved. He was a primary test subject. Voluntarily, I should add, Michael had a complicated relationship with mortality. His childhood was stolen by fame, his adult life consumed by scrutiny. He spoke often about wanting time to stop, to have years to simply exist without the pressure of being Michael Jackson. The research offered a theoretical possibility, biological suspension that could be reversed. Dr. Crane began pacing slowly around the pendulum, his words measured and deliberate. The treatment involved a series of injections over several months, compounds that would alter his cellular metabolism at a fundamental level. The theory was that, under the right circumstances, his body could enter a state of near-complete biological stasis. Not death, but something adjacent to it. All observable signs of life would cease, but on a cellular level, the potential for revival would remain. You're claiming Michael Jackson faked his death, Sarah said, unable to keep the incredulity from her voice. No, Dr. Crane said firmly. Michael Jackson died. His heart stopped. He was not breathing. Every medical test showed death. What I'm telling you is that his death was designed to be temporary. The treatments he received created a biological possibility for reversal, but only within a specific time frame and under specific conditions. The plan was always for him to return, but not for many years. The world needed to forget about Michael Jackson, to let the controversies fade, to allow his music to exist without the shadow of his complicated life. Sarah's mind spun. This is insane. You're describing something that doesn't exist in medical science. It didn't exist publicly, Dr. Crane agreed. But in private research facilities funded by tech billionaires and pharmaceutical companies, extraordinary work had been done on cellular preservation, metabolic suspension, and neuroprotection during periods of clinical death. Michael's case was meant to be the ultimate test, and also his salvation. He could escape the impossible pressures of fame, return when the world had changed, perhaps even resume his career under different circumstances. And you're saying this actually worked? That he came back to life after 20 years. Dr. Crane stopped pacing and looked directly at her. 18 months ago, according to our protocols, a team accessed the crypt. They administered the reversal agents, provided the specific cellular stimulation required, and waited. For 3 days, nothing happened. Then, on the 4th day, they detected a heartbeat. Faint, irregular, but present. Over the following weeks, his biological functions gradually resumed. It took months of intensive care in a completely secret facility. But yes, Ms. Mitchell, Michael Jackson's body returned to life. The words hung in the air like something solid. Sarah wanted to reject them entirely, to walk away from this lunacy. But it aligned too perfectly with the evidence she had gathered. Fresh biological material, temporal impossibilities, fingerprints from inside the crypt. And the expression on Dr. Crane's face was not that of a madman or a liar, but of someone bearing an enormous truth. "Where's he now?" she asked quietly. "That's a problem," Dr. Crane said, his voice heavy. The revival process worked, but there were complications. Severe complications. 20 years of biological suspension caused neurological damage we hadn't anticipated. When Michael woke, he wasn't entirely himself. Fragments of memory, personality shifts, periods of confusion alternating with perfect lucidity. And then, 3 weeks ago, he disappeared from the facility. Simply walked out one night and vanished. We've been searching desperately, trying to locate him before he does something that exposes everything or puts himself in danger. When the maintenance inspection found the crypt disturbed, we realized he must have returned there, perhaps drawn by some subconscious memory or need for familiarity. Sarah struggled to process this. If this is true, where would he go? He's the most recognizable face in the world. Not anymore, Dr. Crane said. 20 years of biological suspension aged him in unusual ways. He doesn't look quite like the Michael Jackson the world remembers. His voice is different, affected by the treatments. He could walk down most streets unrecognized, especially if he's in a state of confusion. But, Ms. Mitchell, you have to understand the stakes here. If Michael appears publicly before we can help him, before we can properly treat the neurological issues, the implications are catastrophic. Not just for him and his family, but for the entire project. There are billions of dollars in research, dozens of people whose work would be exposed, and ethical questions that could shut down life extension research for decades. And the people who are willing to protect those interests at any cost, Sarah said, understanding finally. That's who's been warning me off, threatening me. Dr. Crane nodded. They are not evil, Ms. Mitchell. They are scared. This technology could revolutionize medicine, could save countless lives in the future. But if it's revealed this way, through what looks like either a hoax or something supernatural, it will be destroyed before it can help anyone. They want Michael found quietly, the situation contained, and the research to continue in secret until it's perfected and can be presented properly. Sarah stood and walked to the observatory's windows, looking out over the glittering city. Somewhere in those millions of lights, Michael Jackson, or whatever remained of him, was wandering alone, confused, disconnected from the world that had once worshipped him. A man who had died to escape his life was now lost in the future he had bought with that death. I need proof, she said finally. Everything you told me is extraordinary, but I need concrete evidence before I can decide what to do with this information. Dr. Crane reached into his jacket and produced a small thumb drive. This contains medical records, documented research protocols, and video footage from the revival process. It's everything you need to verify what I've told you. But I'm asking you, as someone who cares about both truth and consequences, to consider carefully what you do with this information. Publication could destroy everything, including Michael's chance at finding peace. Or you could help us. Help us find him before others do, people who might not have his best interests at heart. Sarah took the drive, feeling its weight in her palm. And if I help you find him, what happens then? We get him proper care. We help him adjust to this new world if that's possible. Or we help him find peace if it's not. And his family, who are being kept informed of all of this, will finally have closure on what really happened to their brother, their father. They deserve that much. As Sarah drove home through the empty Los Angeles streets, her mind struggled with the impossible choice before her. She had the story of the century on a thumb drive in her pocket. Proof that death could be reversed, that Michael Jackson had been part of a conspiracy that defied biology itself. But publishing it would unleash chaos, harm the very person at the center of the story, and potentially destroy research that could save future lives. Yet keeping it secret made her complicit in a deception that had fooled the entire world for 20 years. Tomorrow, she would have to decide which version of the truth the world needed to hear. Sarah spent the night reviewing the contents of Dr. Crane's thumb drive. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Medical scans showing Michael Jackson's cellular structure before and after the suspension treatment, with markers that no current medical science could explain. Video footage of the revival process, grainy but clear enough to show a figure lying motionless in a sterile facility. Then weeks later, the same figure moving, breathing, eyes open with confusion and fear. Documents signed by Michael himself, dated months before his death, outlining his consent to this extraordinary experiment. And most compelling, a handwritten letter addressed to whoever discovers the truth. Sarah read the letter with tears streaming down her face. In Michael's distinctive handwriting, he explained his decision. The pain of fame had become unbearable. Every attempt at normalcy was destroyed by scrutiny. His children were growing up in a spotlight he had never wanted for them. The allegations, the trials, the endless judgment, it had all become too much. But suicide was unthinkable, a betrayal of everything he believed. The suspension project offered a third option, a pause button on existence. He could step away from the world that had consumed him, let his children grow up without his complicated presence, and perhaps, if the science worked, returned someday to a world that had forgotten his controversies and remembered only his music. I don't know if this will work. He had written a neat script, but I have to try. Living has become impossible, and I'm not ready to permanently die. Maybe 20 years will be enough time for the world to heal, for my children to build their own lives, for people to remember the music instead of the madness. If you're reading this, then something went wrong, or right, depending on how you look at it. Please understand I meant no harm. I just needed time to not exist. Sarah closed her laptop as dawn broke over Los Angeles. She had her proof. She had her story. And she had a choice that would define her career and possibly her life. Publish and expose a truth so extraordinary it would dominate global conversation for years, or help find a lost man wandering in a future he had purchased with his own death. Her phone rang. It was Janet Jackson. "Ms. Mitchell, Dr. Crane told me he spoke with you. I know what you have, and I know what you're considering. Please, before you make any decision, will you meet with me? Just me, no lawyers, no handlers. Just one sister asking another human being for compassion." 2 hours later, Sarah sat in a private room at the Four Seasons Hotel with Janet Jackson. The superstar looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying. She held a photo of Michael, not the sequin-gloved superstar, but a casual image of him laughing with his children in what looked like his final years. "We knew," Janet said quietly. "The immediate family knew about the experiment. Not everyone, but enough of us. My mother never knew. It would have killed her to think Michael had chosen this. But those of us who understood his pain, who supported his choice. 20 years felt like forever when he left us. Now it's passed in the blink of an eye, and is back but not back. The man we're searching for has Michael's face, his DNA, but his mind is fractured. Sometimes he knows who he is. Sometimes he thinks he's still living in 2009. Sometimes he doesn't recognize his own reflection. Where do you think he is?" Sarah asked. Janet showed her a map on her tablet. Red pins marked possible sightings over the past 3 weeks. Most were in Los Angeles, concentrated around places that had been significant to Michael. The old Jackson family home in Encino, the studio where he recorded Thriller, even the site of the Motown recording building. "He's trying to find himself," Janet explained, "looking for anchors to his identity. We've had teams watching these locations, but is clever even in his confusion. He appears, then vanishes before we can reach him." "What do you want from me?" Sarah asked. "Publish the truth, but not now. Not like this. Help us find him first. We have medical experts ready to help him, facilities that can provide care without exploitation. Once it's safe, once we understand what's possible for his recovery, then we can decide together how to tell the world. And Ms. Mitchell, the world does need to know. This technology, these treatments, they are real, and they could help people facing terminal diagnoses, accident victims, people who need biological time to heal. But if it's revealed through tabloid headlines and conspiracy theories, the research will be buried in controversy and never help anyone." Sarah considered this. "And if he can't be recovered? If the damage is permanent?" Janet's voice broke. "Then we help him find peace, whatever that means. Maybe that's living quietly under a new identity, with care and support. Maybe it's something else. But he deserves a chance to make that choice himself, not to be hunted by media or exploited by those who see him as a phenomenon instead of a person." Over the next week, Sarah became part of the search team. She used her investigative skills to track patterns in the sightings, to predict where Michael might appear next. She interviewed people who claimed to have seen him, a homeless shelter worker who described a man who sang softly to himself in perfect pitch, a late-night diner waitress who served someone who ordered chai tea and talked about missing his children, a music store employee who found a customer weeping silently in the classical section. Each sighting painted a picture of a man lost between worlds, struggling to reconcile memories of a life that ended with a present he didn't fully understand. Sarah documented everything, building not just a story but a map of a fractured soul trying to find his way home. On the 8th night, Sarah was alone at the Motown building site, now a historical marker in a changed neighborhood. It was past midnight, and she had been waiting for 3 hours based on a pattern she had identified. Michael seemed drawn to significant locations during the darkest hours when he could move unseen. She was about to give up when she saw him. He emerged from the shadows like a ghost, thin and moving with an odd, careful gait, as if relearning how his body worked. He wore simple clothes, jeans, and a dark hoodie, nothing that would draw attention. But when he lifted his face toward the moonlight, Sarah's breath caught. It was unmistakably Michael Jackson, yet transformed. The years of suspension had aged him in strange ways. His skin had a different texture. His eyes held depths of confusion and pain that hadn't existed before. He looked at the historical marker, reading it slowly, his lips moving to form the words. Sarah stood slowly, making no sudden movements. "Michael." He turned toward her, startled, poised to run. But something in her voice or expression stopped him. "Do I know you?" His voice was different from the recordings, rougher, but still carried that distinctive quality. "No, but I know you. My name is Sarah. I'm a friend of Janet's. She's been looking for you. Everyone has been looking for you." He laughed, a sound without humor. "Everyone's always looking for Michael Jackson. That's the problem. That's why I left." He touched his chest. "I died, didn't I? I remember dying. The pain stopping. The quiet. It was supposed to be peaceful. But then I woke up and the quiet was gone. Everything's so loud now, in my head. Memories that don't line up right. My children are grown up, but I remember them as babies. The world looks different but the same. Am I crazy, or did I actually do what I think I did?" Sarah moved closer slowly. "You did something extraordinary and brave and maybe a little crazy. You tried to escape something that was destroying you. And it worked, but not perfectly. Your body came back, but your mind needs help to catch up. Let us help you." Michael shook his head, backing away. "They'll want to study me, make me a science project. I'll be even more of a freak than I was before. The man who died and came back. Can you imagine what they'll do to me? The questions, the tests, the cameras." "Oh," Sarah said gently, "you could tell your own story, on your own terms. Let the world understand why you made this choice, what it cost you, what it means for others who are suffering. You have the chance to transform your greatest pain into something that matters, something that could help people. Isn't that what you always wanted, to heal the world?" Tears ran down Michael's face. "I don't know if I'm strong enough. I'm broken. Sarah, the treatments brought me back, but they didn't make me whole. I have holes in my memory, in my sense of self. Sometimes I don't know who I am beyond the name everyone says. How do I tell a story when I can barely remember my own life?" "You don't have to do it alone. Your family wants to help you. Dr. Crane has treatments that might help restore some of what was lost. And I'll tell the parts of the story you can't tell yourself, but only the way you want it told. You control the narrative this time, not the tabloids, not the rumors. You." Michael was quiet for a long time, staring at the historical marker. "They wrote about Motown here, about the music we made. But they don't mention the cost, do they? What it took from all of us. The childhood I gave up, the normal life I never had. I thought escaping would fix that. I thought 20 years would be enough time for the world to forget the bad stuff and remember the good. Was I wrong?" Sarah thought about the memorial service, the thousands of fans still mourning, the music that had never stopped playing, the complicated legacy that remained unresolved. The world hasn't forgotten you, good or bad. But, Michael, maybe that's not the point. Maybe the question isn't whether the world is ready for you, but whether you're ready to face the world as you are now, imperfect, damaged, but still here, still capable of making choices about what comes next. He turned to look at her fully, and in his eyes, Sarah saw something shift, a decision forming, fragile but real. If I do this, if I let them help me and we tell the truth, what happens to the research? The project that brought me back? I don't want it buried. Crazy as it sounds, I want it to help people. I want my death and rebirth to mean something. Then we make that part of the story, Sarah said. We show that medical science can achieve the impossible, but we also show the human cost, the ethical questions, the need for oversight and compassion. We don't hide the complexity, we embrace it. Let people see the real consequence of playing with life and death. Michael nodded slowly. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled, a real smile that transformed his wounded face into something closer to the man the world remembered. You know what's funny? I came back thinking I'd get to start over, be someone new. But standing here, talking to you, I realize I'm still Michael Jackson. Still trying to make the pain into art, the suffering into something beautiful. Some things don't change, even after you die. Sarah called Janet, and within an hour, the reunion happened in that parking lot under the stars. Janet held her brother while he sobbed, 20 years of separation and confusion pouring out. Other family members arrived. His children, now adults who barely remembered their father, meeting the stranger who was somehow still their dad. It was painful and awkward and beautiful in equal measure. There were no easy resolutions, no instant healing. But there was connection, and for the first time since his revival, Michael was not alone. Over the following months, Sarah worked with a family, Dr. Crane, and Michael himself to document his story. They filmed interviews on days when his memory was clear, captured his struggles on days when it wasn't. They assembled medical evidence with ethical commentary, showing both the extraordinary achievement and the profound questions it raised. Sarah wrote an extensive article that was part investigation, part meditation on mortality, fame, and the price of genius. When they finally published, the world stopped. The story dominated every platform, every conversation. Scientists debated the medical evidence. Ethicists argued about consent in human experimentation. Fans mourned, celebrated, and struggled to understand. Conspiracy theorists claimed vindication, while skeptics demanded more proof. It was chaotic and controversial, and exactly what Michael had feared. But something else happened too. People facing terminal illnesses reached out, asking about the research. Funding poured into life extension studies from legitimate sources. Medical ethics boards formed to examine how such technologies could be developed responsibly. And slowly, Michael's choice was reframed not as a bizarre celebrity stunt, but as a desperate act by a suffering human being that had accidentally opened doors to medical possibilities that could save lives. Michael himself remained largely private, working with specialists to address his neurological damage. Some memories returned, others remained forever lost. He would never perform again. The physical and mental demands were beyond him now. But he spent time with his children, building relationships that had been impossible before. He collaborated with researchers, helping them understand the psychological effect of suspension and revival. And occasionally, very occasionally, he would sit at a piano and play, his fingers remembering what his mind sometimes forgot, music flowing out like proof that some essential part of him had survived death and time. Sarah's career transformed overnight. She won every journalism award that existed, but more importantly, she had told a story that mattered. She had chosen compassion over sensationalism, collaboration over exploitation, and she had helped a broken man find a path forward, even when that path was uncertain and difficult. 2 years after the revelation, Sarah visited Michael at the private facility where he lived. They sat in a garden designed to be peaceful and unstimulating, surrounded by flowers he didn't always remember the names of. He was better but not whole, functional but forever changed. Do you regret it? Sarah asked, knowing what you know now, would you still choose to do this? Michael considered the question carefully. I regret that it didn't work the way we hoped. I regret the damage, the confusion, the parts of myself I lost along the way. But do I regret trying to escape the pain? No. And I don't regret that my choice led to research that might help others. Maybe that's what my life was always supposed to be. Not perfect, not what anyone expected, but meaningful in ways I couldn't control. I was a king of pop, then I was dead, then I was something else entirely. Now I'm just Michael, trying to figure out what that means. It's not the ending I imagined, but it's real. And after all those years of living in fantasy, reality might be exactly what I needed. As Sarah drove away that evening, she thought about the word carved into the memorial at Forest Lawn, words that had been changed after the revelation. Michael Jackson, 1958-2009-2043. 3 dates instead of 2, marking birth, death, and rebirth. It wasn't a happy ending or a tragic one, but something more honest, a human ending for a man who had been treated as everything except human for most of his life. The secret that Michael Jackson's tomb had revealed after 20 years was darker and stranger than anyone could have imagined. Not vandalism or conspiracy in the traditional sense, but a truth about human desperation, scientific ambition, and the blurred line between living and dying. It raised questions that medicine, ethics, and society would grapple with for generations. And at the center of it all was a man who had tried to escape his life only to discover that some prisons follow you even beyond death, and some freedom can only be found by accepting exactly who you are, broken pieces and all. The world had demanded a story, and Sarah had given them the truth. Not the comfortable fiction of a peaceful death and eternal rest, but the complicated reality of a second chance that came with impossible costs. And somehow, in that messy, difficult truth, there was something more valuable than any fantasy, the reminder that even in our darkest moments, even when we try to run from ourselves, what makes us human follows us everywhere, even into death and back again. Michael Jackson's greatest performance had been his disappearance, and his final act was learning to live with what remained when the music stopped and only the man was left.